Hey Absol-lites, Pokemon Fire Red with a team of only 3 Pokemon was way easier than I thought, so let's do one that will be exactly as hard as I think. Today we figure out, can I beat Pokemon Fire Red with a team of only Butterfree and Beedrill? First of all, let's just get the obvious out of the way. But Absol, MDB already did this run, but harder because it was Gen 1 and only Beedrill, rather than both of them in Gen 3, I hear you say. And yeah, you're right. I also struggle with monotype runs, whereas quoting MDB directly, he said he'd never do those because they're too easy. And besides, MDB and J-Rose both did a bunch of the same runs in Gen 1. Small Ant, Game Champ, J-Rose, and whoever else all did no damage runs, even if they are in different gens. See my point yet? In the challenge run community, pretty much everyone except maybe the fans know that doing runs that someone else has already done is completely fair game. Anyway, now that my round is over, let's go over to the stats. Butterfree on the left, Beedrill on the right. Pretty much the same terrible stats, with Butterfree more special and Beedrill more physical. Onto the moves though, and oh boy is it bad. Butterfree starts with Confusion, which is good, but then do you see that huge chunk with no damaging moves? Notice that I haven't even mentioned Beedrill yet? Yeah, that's because it's somehow even worse. I'm not really going to talk about it. Our strongest move is a non-stab 40 power dark move, and we can't even pray that we live hits on low health and use Endeavor, and use an Endeavor quick attack strat, because we can't even learn priority moves. Our TM move pool is exactly what you'd expect, with Butterfree's being passable, and Beedrill's being better than its level up moveset, that's for sure, but that's not high praise. Here are the rules for this challenge. I can only use Butterfree and Beedrill in battle, and of course their pre-evolutions. No items in battle, only Pokeballs, held items, and items outside of combat are allowed. No glitches or exploits, and now, make sure to like, subscribe, and ring the bell to join the Absol-lites, and let's get started. Right off the bat, I used the Universal Pokemon Randomizer to replace Bulbasaur with Caterpie. I picked to replace Bulbasaur so that the rival picks Charmander, the hardest for us to fight. I also chose to start with Caterpie rather than Weedle, because I need to pick one and I'll catch the other one the second I get Pokeballs anyway. I name it Hilarious, because that's hilarious. In Viridian Forest, I catch my other Pokemon, a Weedle, that I name MDB, because that's also hilarious. I got to Brock with Hilarious at level 15 and MDB at level 10, so both of them were fully evolved, because I knew that I was dead otherwise. Leading with Hilarious, I two-shot his Geodude, then I put his Onix to sleep and took it out with 3 Confusions. I went for the rival battle south of Nugget Bridge next, and it was actually surprisingly easy. I started by using Sleep Powder to put Pidgeot to sleep, and then I took it out after using Confusion a bunch of times, and him hitting himself when he woke up. Next out is Charmander, and pretty much the same thing happened, though he did manage to get off 1 Ember on me. On to Abra, and it's pretty much free, nothing to say here. Last is Rattata, and I, say it with me now, put him to sleep and won with a few uses of Confusion. Misty ended up being a lot more interesting than I expected. I led with MDB, and while it took ages, thanks to her spamming Harden and Recover, I eventually took down Staryu. For Star Me, I didn't switch and considered using String Shot, figuring that I'll probably need to bring in Hilarious, but I decided to instead use the super effective stab Twin Needle I'd learned instead. That ended up being the right call, and I took it out in 1 move after critting both hits. I really don't think that's supposed to happen. Time for the Alakazam rival battle, and for most of the fight, I just used Sleep Powder and Confusion. Oh, hey. I just realized you're probably wondering why I'm hitting Sleep Powder so often, since it only has 75 accuracy. Well, that's because of Butterfree's ability Compound Eyes, an ability that multiplies the accuracy of every move used by 1.3. Oh, we're at the point where something interesting happened? Nice, I switched out to MDB for Kadabra and one-shot with Twin Needle. Lieutenant Surge was a bit annoying, but overall pretty easy. I took out his first 2 with Sleep Powder and Confusion, but then Raichu used Double Team, woke up almost immediately, used Double Team again, stayed asleep for a while, but then healed. He woke up, so I used Poison Powder, poisoned him, and used a few Confusions before going down. I brought in MDB, who finished the job. I went for Erica next. I took out Victory Bell and a couple Aerial Aces, though not before she paralyzed me and got me down to only 13 health. She used Ingrain, I was fully paralyzed. She used Constrict, I was fully paralyzed again. She used Constrict again, I was fully paralyzed again. And then I finally got in an Aerial Ace before going down. Someone in the comments is gonna have to do the math of that. That was 3 turns of full paralysis in a row. I don't think I've ever seen that happen before. I brought in MDB, who finished it off with Twin Needle. I got in 1 Twin Needle, she used Sunspore, lots of other stuff happened, I got fully paralyzed a bit, and then I finished her off. I'm not sure what Pokemon we're talking about at this point. Next is the Pokemon Tower Rival Battle. I started by putting Pidgeotto to sleep, bringing it low with Psychic, and finishing it with Aerial Ace. I did exactly the same for Charmeleon. Next is Execute, and I remembered that he's quad weak to Bug, so I switched to MDB and one-shot with Twin Needle. I did just that for Kadabra as well. Giovanni time. I used Hilarious to OHKO his 2 Pokemon that are actually ground-type with Psychic, and then I used Chip Damage and Psychic to KO Kangaskhan. Koko was weirdly annoying. His first Scoffing was really easy to deal with, being a one-shot with Psychic. His Muck was really annoying though, but I started by setting up Sleep Powder, and then after a ton of healing and Sleep Powder sticking around probably longer than it should have, I took him down. Next is another Coughing, and it was also an OHKO. Last is Wheezing. I used Sleep Powder, he used Full Heal, I used Psychic, and then, knowing I outsped, used Psychic to finish him off. Rival time. I led with Hilarious to set up Sleep Powder on Pidgeot, and then KO with a few Psychics. Next is Charizard, and I did exactly the same thing. Next is Execute, and I, remembering that it's quad weak to Bug, brought an MDB to OHKO. I did exactly the same thing for Alakazam, but not before he set up Future Sight. Last is Water Onix, and I decided to keep MDB in to tank the Future Sight, which happened, and since MDB lived on just 13 health, I decided to keep him in until he went down so I could get in a clean switch. When I did have to bring Hilarious back in, I used the same trick I always used to bring him down after 1 Sleep Powder and a couple of Psychics. Giovanni time. Again. I one-shot his Nidorino with Psychic and 2-shot his Rhyhorn with the same move. Kangaskhan I decided to set up Poison on rather than Sleep, but I don't think that was the right call, because I was on low health when I beat it. Last is Nidoqueen, and I did about half with Psychic, but then he took me down with Body Slam. I brought in MDB, and all signs say I should have lost, but thanks to Giovanni being absolutely freaking terrible at his job, I won. Seriously, Body Slam did like half, and then he never used it again. Sabrina was surprisingly easy. Kadabra I one-shot with Silverwind, Venomoth lived 1 Psychic, she healed, I got a high roll, I finished her off. Mr. Mime was a one-shot with Silverwind. Last is Alakazam, and it was a one-shot with a crit Psychic. Blaina's up next, and I led with MDB, figuring that the more I do with MDB, the less I have to do with Hilarious, since Psychic only has 10 PP, and I wanted to do as little as possible with him. I got Growlithe to probably 1 HP, then he used Takedown, finishing both of us off. Next is Ponyta, and I used Sleep Powder, followed by Psychic. He healed, I took him out with a couple more Psychics. Next is Rapidash, and I put him to sleep, he healed the sleep, I used Psychic, I put him to sleep again, lots of Psychics and healing happened, I eventually took him down. Last is Arcanine, and I put him to sleep, and then I took him out with a couple of Psychics. Now we're on to Gym Leader Giovanni, and I OHKO'd his first Rhydon with Psychic. I put his second to sleep and used a few Psychics, and after him healing a bit, took it out. Next is Dugtrio, and I put it to sleep, and used Psychic, which just barely didn't KO. He healed, I used Silverwind, planning to do just enough that he wouldn't heal, but then I did more than half but less than heal, and since I knew the Nidos would resist it, used it again to finish him off. On to Nidoqueen now, and I put him to sleep, used Psychic, used Silverwind hoping to finish him off, got him to probably 1 health, and finished him the next turn, and got the Omni Boost from Silverwind. Last is Nidoking, and I OHKO'd with Psychic, thanks to the King being weighted more towards attack than defense, unlike the Queen. Last is our final roadblock before the league, the last regular rival battle. I started by using Sleep Powder on Pidgeot, and then took him out with 2 Psychics. Out now is Rhyhorn, and yet again I used Sleep Powder, but then I OHKO'd with Psychic. Next is Charizard, and I put it to sleep, but then it woke up the next turn and used Scary Face, letting him outspeed and use Flamethrower to bring me to a bit below half, though I did put it back to sleep and take it out the next turn. Next is Execute, and since he is quad weak to Bug, and Beedrill's physical attack is a lot higher than Butterfree's, I brought in MDB to take it out in one Twin Needle, which is also what I did for Alakazam. Last is Water Onyx, and I used Sleep Powder and Psychic, and then he woke up and used Hydro Pump, landing me on 6 HP, I got him to probably 1 HP, and then he woke up and finished me off. But I then was able to bring in MDB and finish the job. We're finally at the Elite Four, starting with Ice Trainer Lorelei. First is Dewgong, and I took it out after Sleep Powder and 2 Psychics. Next is Slowbro, and I put it to sleep and then switched out to MDB, who set up Focus Energy, used 1 Twin Needle, and then got put to sleep after Slowbro woke up. I brought Hilarious back in, but then she used Yawn, for some reason, so I only got in 1 hit, and decided to use it for Toxic. I switched back to MDB to use him to stall, but Lorelei healed when I got her low. I spammed Twin Needle until MDB went down, and then, with his last one, he poisoned Slowbro, letting me take her out in a few more turns. Next is Jinx, and I put her to sleep, and then got literally the best luck I have ever seen, using Silverwind 2 turns in a row, and getting the Omni Boost both times. Silverwind, if you don't know, has a 10% chance of boosting all the user's stats at once. That means that to get the Omni Boost twice in a row is a 1 in 100 chance to happen. Next is Lapras, and I got put to sleep, used Psychic, and when Psychic didn't even do half, used Silverwind, and got the Omni Boost again. That's like 1 in 1,000 at this point. That's rarer than a Masuda Method Shiny. That's gotta be a glitch of some sort. I'm never this lucky. Last is Cloister, and since Cloister's thing is stalling, I decided to blow that strat back in her face and set up Toxic, so that I would do reliable damage every turn. I used Silverwind, she protected, I used Psychic, I finished her off. Next is Fighting Trainer Bruno. This fight was really annoying, so I'm just gonna record every attempt I do until I get a success, while going over what I'm trying to do here. I made a save after healing HP, but before healing any power points, because I knew that if I decide what I just need to do for this fight is grind more, I can't get back my ethers, but I can get potions and revives back. I'm trying this fight over and over, and resetting anytime Hilarious goes down before Machamp. I'm always using Toxic on every one of his Pokemon, because I figure that if I can't deal with him in 1 hit, having a backup of Toxic is the way to go. You'll see in the footage that I actually mess up a few times, be it forgetting to heal my PP, not using Toxic, whatever. One time I actually messed up so bad, I reloaded the wrong save file, and went back to before I beat Lorelei for a sec. I only recorded trying this for about 10 minutes, but actually grinding out these attempts over and over has got to have taken me at least an hour. I probably have time, so I'm just gonna go on a short rant here. So, as you can probably tell from watching the footage, I sped the game up. I tend to avoid doing that for stuff I record, but I wanted to finish this run today, so for grinding out attempts at Bruno until the luck lined up and I won, I did speed the game up. Now, a lot of people think that makes the run cheap, and I'll be honest, I don't get that. MDB mentioned one time that he doesn't speed up the game because he feels like if he can virtually skip the grinding by speeding up, that takes away some of the challenge by removing the desire not to grind. And I'll be honest, I don't get that. Maybe his speed up increases the game more than mine, but for me, grinding is still a colossal pain, whether I do it sped up or not. So, in short, if you feel like speeding up the game cheapens the run, feel free not to use it, but don't complain when other people do. We're probably at the point where we won, but I'm not going to go over that, because honestly, I'm not 100% sure what happened. I was super brain fried by the time I beat it. All I know is that for that one attempt, the odds were ever in my favor, and I finally won. We are finally at Agatha, and this, for once, was actually a really easy fight. I used Psychic to just barely not OHKO Gengar. She healed, I used Silverwind, and then she switched. Don't ask me why she switched, I do not know. Agatha does that. This is why J-Rose calls it the Agatha Lottery. Golbat went down to 1 Psychic and 1 Silver Wind. Gengar is out now, and I just barely didn't KO and finished it off with 2 Silver Winds, both of which gave me the Omni Boost. I swear, half the time the game is going easy on me, and half the time it's conspiring to make my life a living heck. I don't need to talk about the other 3, they were all Okos with Psychic, thanks to having 2 Omni Boosts. Would you believe after Bruno that this is the first attempt? Time for our penultimate challenge, Dragon Trainer Lance. I was absolutely butchered on the first 3 attempts, so I'm just gonna do what I did for Bruno and go over what I'm trying to do in the voiceover while I play a ton of attempts over and over. What you're seeing now is almost half an hour of attempts sped up to fit what I'm saying right now. I did this at an increased speed too, so this was probably at least an hour of in-game time, but I can't know, as I reset every time I lost so I didn't have to do the whole league again. As you can see, for a while, I just used Sleep and Psychic, but that didn't work, so I got rid of Sleep for Protect at one point, but that also didn't work, so I instead reset to before I did that, and used Protect instead of Silver Wind instead. This is the part of the video where any normal YouTuber would tell you to either follow me on social media, or send this to everyone you know and love, but I don't have social media, and I'm feeling passive-aggressive. So send this to someone that you're mildly annoyed with the caption, "Wait for it." Like something good's gonna happen. But that's the joke. My stuff is terrible. I don't know what kind of divine karmic punishment pulled you here, but we're all in this together, so subscribe and share this with someone you're a bit annoyed with. Okay, I need to grind. I did a bit of off and on grinding throughout the day during my virtual classes, which I think we can all agree is the mood of 2020, and then I recorded most of the grinding session before needing to get up for a while to get food. While grinding, I listened to Late to the Party, a D&D podcast I really like. I think I can summarize it best by quoting Jordan the DM directly from DMing me on Discord. For newbies to D&D, it's a great, comfortable introduction to the basics without a bazillion threads to follow, and for more experienced D&D players and listeners, it's a fun interpretation of what D&D might be like in a modern setting. It's a drama with a comedic flair rather than a comedy with a dramatic flair, but the comedy and goofiness of the cast really help drive the story without weighing you down too much as a listener. Also, the group is currently doing a one-shot called A Christmas Peril that I think I can also sum up with how Jordan described it. Quote, "It's basically if Ebenezer Scrooge from A Christmas Carol decided that instead of dealing with ghosts himself, he would hire ghost hunters to track down the ghosts and eliminate the threat. It's very fun for a Monster Hunter story, as well as a story with excellent characters, and growth in a short span of time, just like in the original Christmas Carol. Anyway, it's really good, check it out, peace." Also, while I was grinding, I just invested in EVs for whatever the Pokemon's stronger attack and weaker defense stats are. By the way, I also replaced Fury Attack and MDB with Return, a move that's almost certainly at max power by this point. Oh, and while I grind, I have one thing to say. So, my channel has been growing a bit lately, not a ton, but steadily up and up, and I just want to make sure that my community is all positive. So, everyone's entitled to their own opinions, of course, but I also just want to make sure everyone's respectful to each other, so just try and do that and don't be hurtful. After spending a day of off and on grinding that I just told you about, I came back with Hilarious at level 81 and MDB at level 80. Water Onix, I took down with a bunch of Sleep and Psychic. Dragonite is out now, and I used Toxic, and then I stalled it out with Protect and switching to MDB until I beat it. Next out is Aerodactyl, and I used a bunch of Sleep and Psychic to beat it. Now on to his first Dragonair, and I used Sleep, but it took a while thanks to Shedskin, and I took it out with a few Psychics. Now on to his final Dragonair, and I used a bunch of Sleep Powder, but then I used one final Psychic. He woke up, but my only way of doing damage was stalling with Toxic, a terrible strategy when he has Shedskin. He took me out pretty soon. Despite this though, I think I can win if I get just a little bit luckier. I think the best way to do this is to do what I did for Bruno and the previous attempt at Lance, just try for about half an hour until I either win or accept that I need to grind more. Well, I would've, but on the very first attempt after I started doing that, I managed to get insanely lucky with Shedskin, crits, and Sleep staying on, and I won. Wow! Last is the Pokemon Champion. I put Pidgeot to sleep, but then I crit O-code, so it probably didn't matter. Next is Rhyhorn, then I put it to sleep, then took it out with 2 Psychics. Next is Charizard, and I put it to sleep, and took it out with 3 Psychics. Honestly, if it weren't for a berry Charizard had, he probably would have healed, which likely would have basically ended it there for me. Next is Alakazam, so I switched out to MDB, used Twin Needle, and O-code. That's also what happened for Executor. Last is Water Onix, and I brought back in Hilarious. I put him to sleep, and then got him to probably 1 HP. He healed, I used Psychic, but that was my last Psychic. I set up Toxic on him, used Protect, and then switched out to MDB. And then I used Return, but I didn't think I'd win, since Beedrill is so weak. But then, somehow I just, did? Even watching the footage back to write this, I feel like I shouldn't have won. The odds were not in my favor. Yet somehow I did, and it was great. I think I actually yelled, "Praise Helix!" when I won. Man, this run was really weird. The early game was pretty hard, the mid game was pretty much smooth sailing, and then Bruno and Lance were both absolutely brutal. The champion fight was also really weird. Honestly, I feel like before that Water Onix, if anything had happened differently, I'd have lost. If Pidgeot hadn't been an Oko, if Rhydon or Charizard had woken up, if MDB didn't outspeed his Psychic types, if any of that happened, I would not have won. Yet somehow I did, and it was great. I think the next run I do will be an easier one, so I will see you there. But before then, thanks for watching, this has been fun, make sure to like and subscribe to join the Absol-lites and all of that good stuff, and peace out!